Trey Parker, Matt Stone, welcome back to Fresh Air, and congratulations on the Book of Mormon.
Thanks. Cool, thank you.
Before we talk about why and how you wrote the musical, let's talk about the opening song that we just heard. The ringing doorbells as part of the song that works so well musically and in terms of the narrative. How did you decide to work that in? How did that come to you?
It was actually the first song we wrote for the entire show. Once we knew that we wanted to start with missionaries, and we knew we wanted to start with missionaries at the Missionary Training Center, and let's start the way that most people, your average person, their interaction with Mormons, which is those guys in white shirts that come to your door. So before we get into anything else about Mormonism, we just wanted to start there. And then it was pretty quickly we came up with the hook of let's use the doorbell as actually part of the music.
So did Mormons come to your door, and did your family let them in when you were growing up?
They never came to my door, I don't think. I don't know if my dad would have let them in either.
Yeah, we grew up in Colorado, so we were around a lot of Mormons, and we went to school with Mormons and things like that. But I think that the first time I actually saw them come to the door was in college. Actually, I had some Mormons come to where I was staying in college. Since then, we've had a few, and I always tried to start kind of a dialogue with them. But you learn pretty quickly that they are trained impeccably to be able to handle anything. And so it's pretty cool to try to mess with
knock
them
off their game.
You can't do it.
But then with Hello, the idea was that you'd reveal that you're at the Missionary Training Center, which is in Provo, Utah, which is where they learn all their language skills, and they learn their what to do when you do get invited into a house. And we found out later in the Missionary Training Center they actually have prop living rooms, fake living rooms, with actors that, it's one of your tests is to go into this fake living room and sit down and do your spiel, and you have to deal with this in a real situation.
It's like the holodeck. It's like the holodeck on Star Trek.
It's like a driving simulator, yeah.
So did you go to a missionary training center as part of your research for the show?
No, we didn't go there, but we went to, we did take a field trip to Salt Lake City with Bobby Lopez, our co-writer, who had never been to Salt Lake City. And we interviewed a bunch of missionaries or ex-missionaries, people who'd been on mission, which really, for us, was pretty easy to find. We just talked to waiters and in downtown Salt Lake City, most post-collegiate, kind of 25 to 30-year-old guys. And almost every single waiter we asked if they'd been on a mission, they had. Right? It was every single one. So that was where we got a lot of our research done about missionaries, was actually in Salt Lake City.
So maybe this is a good time to hear the song in which the missionaries are getting paired, and they're finding out what mission they're going to be sent on. And the song is called 2 by 2. And would you talk about writing this song, and maybe talk about how it changed your relationship to be writing songs with a third person, with Robert Lopez, who co-wrote the songs for Avenue Q?
It was like being in a band. I mean, it was just, we would just hang out in a room, and we'd kick around the idea of what's the hook of the song. And we'd come up with the hook, and you'd sort of talk about that first. And we're like, okay, well, what is it? They're sent 2 guys at a time. They're being paired off here. Of course, the idea of 2 by 2 came out really quick. We thought it would be a really military. And I remember it started being much more.
It was a much more da-dum. It was much more snare drum and a militaristic kind of beat. 2 by 2, we go from door. Because it was supposed to be this joke of they're the army. And we had this kind of metaphor going that they're sent along. They're soldiers of God, and they're going around the world to sell their stuff. The joke, and it kind of comes at the end of this song, is just how funny we find that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to be kind of grammatically weird with 2 ofs in there. And so we made the of kind of this running joke of we're the army of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you can start stacking these ofs in this crazy way, and that was kind of a central joke too.
And I remember at one point we're like, yeah, it's a good song, but it's a little dry. And we realized it was because of the military thing. I remember Bobby being like, we could put this different feel to it that's a bit more just cheesy. And then that's when one of my prouder moments where I remembered a thing from high school. When I was in choir in high school, we actually had a song where we sang, ooh, ah, hey, ah, shout out, wow.
I love that stuff.
And it was like, shout out, wow. And I remember and so we actually just recorded that, singing it, shout out, wow. And it just, the rest of the song fell into place after that.
It's a great song. So here it is, 2 by 2, as the young missionaries are paired off and assigned their mission. And this is from the Book of Mormon. So as we heard in that song, the 2 stars of the show, the 2 lead missionaries from the show, are assigned what turns out to be Uganda. Why did you choose Uganda as being the nightmare come true as opposed to the dream come true for them?
We just wanted it to be that place that you always read about and a lot of times it's sub-Saharan Africa, it seems like. I mean, lately it's been Haiti. or it's just that place you go, can this place get a break? You know, they have earthquakes and then cholera and then a warlord, you know, and then a famine and then, you know, no water. And we, you know, it was just supposed to be that place. And we settled on Uganda, honestly, because they speak English there. So that seemed one, like, less leap to make. And we settled on northern Uganda, which is at a humanitarian crisis of its own. And it borders Congo and the Sudan. So it was kind of a bunch of different things that brought us to that. We didn't start with Uganda. It's supposed to be just generic, war-torn, worst place on earth. That where if you are from Utah, nothing you've learned in Utah when you're 18 or 19 years old makes any sense when you get there.
Let me stop you there. Is that part of what you were trying to kind of puzzle through in this musical? Why 19-year-old white missionaries from Salt Lake City would feel like they could go to a place in Africa where they didn't understand the culture and have something to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like Trey said, we have this coming-of-age story, which is, you know, missionaries, you know, you're at that perfect age. When I was 18, I thought I knew everything. And I think, you know, you're 18, you're told you've got all this information, now go change the world. You're like, and it's just think naturally when we're all about 17 or 18, we think we know everything. And then life, you know, life slaps you upside the head. And I think that happens for a lot of people just when they go an hour away to college, or they get, you know, they move out of the house. But a lot of these kids go to another country, another culture, and a lot of them end up in third world countries, and they're probably seeing things that they never have seen before. So in addition to the coming of age story, we have a big fish out of water story going. And it just seemed really funny to send these two, you know, kids who've grown up in this perfect place, you know, quote unquote, to a place where nothing makes sense that they've learned. So definitely that was a big part of it.
So I don't want people to get the wrong idea about how you present Mormonism in your show, because you kind of challenge the credibility of this, the literal credibility of the story of the Book of Mormon. But you love your characters, and you think that eventually they do good in the world. Not in the way that they expected to, but you're not about being, like, really kind of cynical in this.
Yeah, no, and I really what I grew up loving Broadway for was the fact that it at least, you know, in all these classics, you know, they weren't cynical. They were very optimistic, and it offered this kind of, they always ended with a big happy number and everything was okay. And as as cheesy as that can seem, I loved it, you know, and that's, you know, I don't think anyone would want to go see a 2-hour-long Mormon bashing. That's not, we wouldn't want to see that either. It's just not, obviously you have to have characters that you love, and even if you in certain things have characters that you love to hate, that's fine. But, you know, everyone wants to see a little piece of themselves up there. And that's what makes a musical, draws people in. And so, you know, like we were saying about the whole thing about this, even though this is about a very devout Mormon getting put with someone and getting shot around the world and trying to be very Mormon, people can relate to just that feeling of being in high school and getting out and thinking, okay, well, now I'm ready to just go tell everyone what's up and make my mark in the world, and it's going to be really awesome. And then you get slapped back down to reality, you know, and I think that everyone can relate to that part of it. And also, the reason we knew it would work great with Bobby right away was because we all shared this thing where it's like, we loved the goofiness of Mormon stories. We loved the, you know, some of them were so incredulous, and yet we really liked almost all the Mormons we'd ever met.
So have Mormons in the audience enjoyed the musical? Do you know? Have you gotten feedback?
It's really funny. We can actually, when we were there for previews and we were there that whole month where we'd go and watch it every single night and try to change it, you could hear the pockets of Mormons. You could hear where they were, because there's some certain things in the show that are very specifically Mormon, and things you either are at least ex-Mormons, you know, like you could hear these people, this little group of people laugh, and no one else really got the joke, but it would just be some reference to something that's very Mormon, and you know, obviously it's a select group of Mormons that are going to come to the show have kind of embraced it.
Mm-hmm.
And the official church response?
The official church response was something along the lines of, the Book of Mormon, the musical, might entertain you for a night, but the Book of Mormon, the book, as scripture, will change your life through Jesus, or something like that.
Which is a great response.
Which we actually completely agree with. It's totally a very big-hearted American response. It's kind of like the Mormon Church's response to this musical is almost like our QED at the end of it. It's like, see, we told you that's a cool American response to, like, a ribbing, a big musical that's done in their name. So that was like the end. We're like, there, see, that's what we were talking about. Because before the church responded, a lot of people would ask us about, like, are you afraid of what the church is going to say? And Trey and I were like, they're going to be cool. Trust us. They're going to be cool. And people in New York are like, no, they're not. They're going to be, mad at you guys. They're going to be protests. We're like, nope, they're going to be cool. And I mean, I don't know if we totally knew, but we weren't that surprised by the church's response.
We had faith in them.
Yes, we had faith.
There's obviously some Disney in there, and one of the songs is kind of a parody of Hakuna Matata. And in The Lion King, Hakuna Matata is a song about the expression that describes our problem-free philosophy. It's a lighthearted song. And your version is Hasadega Ibuwai. And do you want to talk a little bit about this song?
Yeah, I mean, that's our, like, Welcome to Vietnam song. That's the song where, you get off the plane, and they just get off the plane, like, full of vigor, like, here we are, we're here to change the world. And it's like, okay, you're in a new reality. And so it started kind of from an anti-Lion King, songs, like, but write it in that same tone, so it has that same kind of gallows humor. But yeah, I mean, that was a really fun song to write, actually. That's where we really got to go for it. That was the point of that song.
Okay, so imagine the missionaries stepping off the plane, meeting some actually very poor people from Uganda, and hearing this song. This is from the cast recording of the Book of Mormon. Okay, so we're fading out before all the expletives.
Before the good stuff.
Yeah.
For the meat and potatoes.
After this part, we just can't play it on the radio. And it's quite a send-up of the Hakuna Matata. Have you gotten interesting reactions to this one?
Well, Hasadega Ibuwai is that it's that song in the show where people are in or they're out. It's like basically, it's either the point where we lose you or we really get you on board, and we have a lot of that. In a lot of the stuff we do, we have that moment in the show, which is either you're with us or you should get out now, and it really is sort of that song.
So this is your first Broadway musical. You've done musicals, but they've been animated. So now you're working with real people, real audiences in the theater. You have to worry about renting a theater, an orchestra, just, all the stuff. So what's one of the biggest nightmares that you had that you'd never have to face doing animation?
Well, I'd say, what was crazy for us and something we had to get used to fast was just the idea that if we want to rewrite something, if we want to change something, it's like, especially in a song, then you got to get it reorchestrated, then you got to get it re-choreographed, then you got to teach it to everybody, and meanwhile you're doing a show that night. So it was just this crazy thing where we're so especially with South Park, we can change things so last minute, and especially because we do almost all the voices, we can like go in there, we can write it down, run into the booth and record it, slap it in, see how it looks, change it again if we need to. And with this, pretty quickly we had people telling us like, guys, you can't change this much right now, and learning how to dish that out, learning how to, all right, well, we can change these lines right now. We'll give them this because we want to change that. We'll try to see that in 2 nights' performance. We're not going to see it tonight. Just a lot of things like that was, for us, a big learning curve.
Yeah.
Okay, time for another song. So I want to play Turn It Off, which is this great production number. And, in a lot of musicals, there's that big, inspiring number where you're told to, be yourself and think great thoughts. Whenever you're sad, put on a happy face, or if you fall down, pick yourself up and start all over again. But this is called Turn It Off. So, if you're feeling something unpleasant, just, turn it off. It's a song about repressing feelings. Tell us about writing this song and the kinds of songs that inspired this one.
This was a little ditty. I wrote a first version of this basically because we knew we had to have a big tap number. We've got a bunch of dudes in, white shirts and ties. It's like, we've got to have a tap number. But this was a great example of a song that I had just a little ditty for that was just this very repetitive. Turn it off like a light switch. Just go click. Da, 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 da. And I remember Bobby right away saying, yeah, it's cool. Kind of runs in place. It's kind of was the same thing musically over and over and over. And this song expanded and expanded. And then we all would sit in the room together and say, well, maybe it shouldn't just be that. It was all just the stuff about gay thoughts and all those jokes. And they were great jokes and it worked. But then we sat there going, well, what else? Maybe we should have other Mormons chime in on other things that aren't just gay thoughts, but other things. And we started writing the other verses. And then Bobby actually wrote the verse about the the father, the abusive father, and then it grew and it grew, and then Casey came in and turned it
Your
from a little
co-director
tap
and
number,
choreographer,
the co-director. And choreographer, and turned it from a little tap song into a giant tap song, and added all this other stuff. And so it was just this great song that you watched going from this little ditty to this big Broadway number, kind of before your eyes.
So let's hear it. This is Turn It Off from the new cast recording of the Book of Mormon, which was co-written by my guests, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the co-creators of South Park. So every time I hear that song, I laugh because it's ironic, but it's so upbeat and so catchy and so, I don't know.
That song for me is funny because it's so happy, but it's about something that we all
exactly. It's about all these
all
tragic
know, and
things.
It's kind of the most tragic thing, yeah. And I mean, not just for the character that sings it is played by Rory O'Malley, who just kills it in that song. He's amazing. Is about a missionary who's overseas and obviously gay, and the church has just said, yeah, you're not, just don't think about that, which is no solution at all. But it's not even if you're just, they send these 19-year-old kids around the world, even if, they're just the sexual beings, they're sexual animals, and they just say, yeah, just turn that off. And there's just nothing in that. At the point in the story when Price, they've landed in Africa, they've seen some horrors, they're really questioning what the hell's going on. They go back to the mission. He says, wow, I'm having some confusing thoughts. And then this is the song that's given to them. So the song is not supposed to really help you. He realizes it doesn't really get much. He doesn't get much out of it.
Was it really amazing to hear your songs orchestrated in the way they were played by a live band in a theater?
Amazing. And what's the really crazy part about it is they're all kind of rehearsing off on their own in their own building, all the musicians, while you're still doing it there in the theater with a piano and drums. And then you finally, about 4 days before you're going to open, you go and listen to the actors sing it. What do they call it? Sitzprobe?
Sitzprobe.
They call it sitzprobe. And they're like, oh, wait till sitzprobe. And you go and you actually hear, and it's the first time even all these actors and actresses, of which some of them have been doing workshops for 5 years, are sitting there hearing, singing it, and this whole orchestra's backing them up. And I remember Nikki, who sings Salt Lake City, she did that song, and the orchestra's backing her up, and she just broke down. She just started crying and couldn't finish. It was really beautiful.
Was really cool. It's the first time hearing it with a 9-piece band instead of a 2-piece band.
Yeah.
Just one more thing. I think that the Book of Mormon has something of the quality of South Park in the sense that South Park is just kind of stripped down animation. It's down to the basics. And there's something so basic about the show. It's great music, great performers, great orchestrations, really original concepts, but there's nothing fancy about the sets. It's just
It was a very conscious decision. And the reason that we did that is because we did so many workshops in New York in the sort of 3 years leading up to it. And we would do these workshops which were no costumes, no light, just in a big room with fluorescent lights and 40 people sitting there. And it would kill. And we're just like, okay, all we can do now is ruin this. Even though we got to take this to the stage, let's be really aware of not, let the songs and the acting and the music and the performances, let that all be center stage. Let's not surround it by a bunch of stuff. We knew it worked without any of it. So let's add just enough to make it a beautiful Broadway show, but not step on any toes.
Well, it's been great to talk with you again. Congratulations on all the success you've been having with the Book of Mormon, and thank you so much for coming back to Fresh Air.
Thanks
cool.
a lot.
Thanks a lot.